And another excellent question was asked around the when we get into a how do we know that we are uh, uh, carrying stress? So an example is, on the road you're driving and someone comes and tailgates you and you flip out, get really stressed out, have to stop the car, let them pass, or maybe start muttering under your breath or yelling or something. How do you know it's you versus something horrible that they did? This is a very important point. Most people go through life thinking that other people are stressed out and they're okay. And this is a very, very important point, because unless you have this right, you are blind. What is it to be blind? It's can't see where you're going, but you have to go somewhere, so you're just going to walk and hope for the best.
Yeah, like on road,
Just walk and hope for the best.
yeah,
And hope you don't put your foot in a pothole or something and break it.
yeah,
It's a very serious thing to be blind going through life. And a person who's actually blind, they don't just sit there blind. They develop their hearing sense. They get a little stick and they feel. So a person who knows they're blind, they're okay. They're okay. The people who don't know they're blind, who are blind, those are the ones who are destroying the world and themselves. Honestly. When you're blind and you don't know it, that's when you create the most damage.
yeah, right.
And most people are blind to their relationship with stress. I'll say that again. Most people are blind to their relationship with stress. And so what they do is they go on the road. Driving. Think they're fine. And what do we mean by they think they're fine? The analogy that I'll use, this is a very common analogy, it's a horrible analogy in terms of some poor person must have done some unethical experiments on a frog, but there's a hot plate with water in it, and in there is a frog. I'm not very good at drawing frogs, but I think it looks something like this. Maybe. So here's what the science shows. If you take a frog and you put it in boiling water, it jumps out. It knows that water is boiling and it's like, get me out of here. Just like that. Because the frog knows internally its temperature sensor works well enough that it knows room temperature from 100 degrees Celsius, boiling. It knows the difference. It senses, as soon as it touches, oh, this isn't good, jumps up and out, and it lives.
Yeah, it is a different thing.
And so, the other frog, and we'll come to you, the other experiment is they put the frog in cold water, really cold water, and then they turn the temperature up a few degrees at a time. So from 20 degrees to 22 degrees, and just leave the frog, and the frog's happy. Give the frog some flies or something, it eats, happy. Turn it up a few more degrees, and give it some more flies, it eats, happy. A few more degrees. Happy, happy, happy. 30 degrees, 40 degrees. Slowly come 50 degrees, 60 degrees, 70 degrees. And the frog is happy, happy, happy. Until it's dead.
Yeah, I see.
But it never jumps out.
Yeah, never jump over, yeah.
Never jumps out. Because the internal regulatory system of a frog is simple. It's not complicated. It only has one way to assess temperature, and it is not foolproof. It's in engineering we call it redundancy. A frog does not have a lot of redundancy in how it assesses temperature. Because how often is a frog going to be in nature in boiling water? It's just not. That's a human thing. We can do that to things. But in nature, boiling thing is like volcano. There ain't no frogs in a volcano. And under the sea, where there's there's volcanoes there. There's no frogs there either. Frogs live in places where they don't have to deal with boiling temperatures. And so they don't need a complex temperature system. And that's what happens. Once we know the system, we know if we just turn up the temperature a little bit, the frog won't know it, and the frog will cook. Humans are different. If I throw a human in that boiling water, few degrees, it is true, you won't sense it as much. And the water will get really, really hot before you sort of get uncomfortable. But you have many, many more systems. You have this is taking a long time. Or you'll have, why am I here? I don't want to die. What are you all doing? Why are you turning on this? What are you trying to do? We'll start asking the questions. We have intuition. It'll tell us you need to get up and go. We have so many more systems. So this is really silly. A human won't be like this in water. But you know what? If you, instead of water, you call it stress, and you've been in it for 20 years, 30 years, all of a sudden you can cook just like the frog. And so when you're on the road and you've been cooking for 20, 30 years in high stress, you think you're low stress, but actually you're operating at an 8 out of 10 stress. And then someone comes and cuts you off. Someone goes a little bit too slow. You tailgate them or they tailgate you, and you flip out. It has nothing to do with that person because it is no different. It is a trigger. This is a trigger. It's not the cause of stress. Until you understand that, you were triggered. But the trigger, a simple trigger isn't the cause of like a gun firing. There has to be gunpowder. There has to be a bullet. There has to be... A simple spark does not fire a gun. A spark next to a bullet, a loaded bullet, ready to go, that's what fires the gun. But so many people blame their stress on their triggers, and that's not how it works. How it works is if you have fire, if you have like a bunch of dry sticks, you have a lot of dry wood, the wood will catch fire when there's a spark. When the fire, that's when the fire will start. But the fire is not caused alone by that spark. Yes, that spark brought it out. But why was the fire as big? It's because there's a lot of dry fuel. And if you've had a lot of stress in your life, maybe it's dry fuel and a bunch of gasoline. and it's going to catch a big fire from a little thing. Getting cut off in traffic, that's their problem, that's not your problem. But because you're like a dry fire ready to start at any moment, just looking for a bit of spark, then you do that. But then the tragedy is why you don't learn from that is because you blame the spark. It's because of you that this happened. It's because of you I'm like this. It's because of you. You. No. Me. Own your 1%. That's in the principles. Own your 1%. You always have some part in a conflict with anybody. You always have one little part. And if you own it, your fire will lose a little of its gasoline. And all of a sudden, when you do that lots, someone cuts you off, you say, oh, bless you, you go first. You clearly have somewhere important to go. Go ahead. I'll pray for you. Someone does something bad to you, oh, bless you. The Christians say when someone slaps you, turn the other cheek. That's what they mean. You'll be able to let it go. Why do we say most stress is preventable? Is because you can choose to let it go. You can choose to let it go. But you got to stop blaming. You got to stop blaming your spouse for all the marital problems that you have. You got to stop blaming your life circumstance for how you are. It might be how you ended up the way you are. You probably have some role in it. And definitely starting this moment, you have every responsibility to set your course in a more positive direction. That's all you. But you have to get out of this mode where you're just blaming triggers. Oh, I'm like this because this. You might be right, but that doesn't help you. What helps you is understanding how much firewood you've collected in life, understanding how much gasoline, and slowly starting to take some of it away. How do you do that? Self-therapy. Connect to self, connect to others, commit to daily practice. Take away, stick by stick, move it away. And all of a sudden, your spouse won't be able to trigger you as much. Your doctor won't be able to trigger you as much. The news won't trigger you as much. You won't be as bothered on the road. It'll happen globally like that because you are doing a very good thing. You're taking responsibility for your recovery. And the beautiful thing is you can have a harmonious, pristine life that you had when you were a baby and that you can have again. No matter how far down the tubes you've gone, you can build a healthy relationship with stress, and you can have a better quality of life than you've ever imagined. And that's the truth. And that's certainly my prayer. And so I think that's where we'll stop this lecture. So this will conclude our series on stress, although I'm sure other lectures will comment on stress because it's so central.